Hey guys, and welcome back to episode 24 of Front Boards and Four Baggers. I'm Eddie with Cornhole Bag Reviews. We got Corbin with Corbin's Cornhole Reviews. Special guest of the week, the man himself, Cornhole Science, around the ACL, the greatest voice in Cornhole, Anthony Ayon. How you doing, man?
Good, man. Hey, I appreciate that intro, man. That was awesome. Thank you for that.
I
doing good. Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, I didn't even go into the pro player, all the other stuff you're doing now. Commentator, pro commentator. I'm like, man, this
all
is
the accolades
all over the cornhole world. But why don't we get into a little bit of, so obviously anybody who doesn't know, maybe they've heard you in the YouTubes or on the around the ACL or in the commentary, but you were an ACL pro. Now you're taking a step back with your kid doing his basketball thing as well as taking a different stance on cornhole. But kind of how did you get into cornhole originally?
So that was kind of a fun story. So in Denver, out of Denver, Colorado. The Nuggets were putting on a cornhole tournament, and I hadn't played. I mean, I could probably count on one hand the number of times I'd played cornhole at that point. So I didn't know anything about just putting a bag in a hole. That was about it. But yeah, it was my uncle at the time who ended up being my pro partner eventually. Was like, hey, the Nuggets are putting on this cornhole tournament. You want to go try and see what's going on? I'm like, let's do it. Let's go. So ended up playing, our first round, we played the best players in the state at the time. If anybody knows cornhole in Colorado area, you'll know BJ Torres. He's been just a staple in growing the sport, not just one of the best players. But so we played him first round. Long story short, he was doing amazing things that I needed to know more about. Someone who's technical in my background, I'm like, he's doing that on purpose. That's just not an accident. I need to know how he's doing that. So cool guy. He was like, hey, just come out. Here's the address every Thursday night. Showed up. This is probably how a lot of people got started. You show up to your first, blind draw or your first tournament, and you're like, okay, I need more of that. How do I keep doing this?
Oh yeah.
So that was back in 2017 was when I first started playing. And it has literally been digging a hole since, man. I've been getting deeper and deeper into cornhole since then. I mean, it has been like, gas pedal full down. I mean, everything from, obviously initially wanted to get good at the game. So using kind of more of my technical background, I was kind of big into video and breaking stuff down and why is he doing that? And that's when the ACL started dropping content on ESPN. So now I'm like, all right, I don't have to just watch the guys in my local area. What are these guys doing on TV? So I'm recording them and breaking that down. So that's where it all started, and it's just continued into this deep dive of cornhole. Man.
Oh, dude, you want to call it a rabbit hole? So you see all this. I started playing cornhole 6 months ago. So.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah. So now I got a podcast, YouTube. Oh yeah, man. I'm the same way.
Wow,
like
6 months ago.
All in, man.
That is awesome.
Got to learn it all. But
yeah,
Well, that's awesome. So obviously your area has a lot of, commented pros, a lot of players that aren't pros that could be pros are in your area. So I mean, when you were out learning, going to your first blind draw, was it a really good area to learn and get competitive quickly?
Yeah. So actually Mile High Cornhole, the one that I mentioned that I showed up to first, they have been the muscle in the entire Mountain South conference. So what are we? Colorado, New Mexico, Utah. Colorado is the strength in that. And then Mile High Cornhole is the most talented club in all three of those states. So I was fortunate enough to be, getting beat up by the best players in the area. We've got really good players, and having been a guy now that's been seen talent all around the nation, Colorado has the level of talent to compete at that level. It's just not as deep. You go to like these East Coast places and you'll have 8 people that can throw 10 plus PPRs in an entire tournament, not just 2. So we definitely have people that could compete. I know we have 2 guys right now in the state that actually aren't pros that could compete and probably finish in the top 40 or 50. So those are the guys that I want to play constantly because I want to lose.
Oh yeah.
For those out there who are playing to win, playing maybe down, I don't know what you want to call them, sandbaggers or not. If you want to get good at this game, you have to get beat, and you have to get beat often. So that was my goal, was to play the best people all the time and learn something from every loss. So I was able to do that at Mile High Cornhole.
Dude, I tell people all the time, like when I started doing my vlogs I record all my gameplay and then post them on YouTube, when I had to go back and edit my gameplay, that's when you learn mistakes, is when you watch yourself make mistakes and get you're like, why did I lose 21-0? Oh my gosh, that.
Yes,
all these things that you're like, man, if I just didn't do that dumb shot, I would have scored. If I didn't, it's just so much about learning from getting your butt kicked. But when did you know kind of that you wanted to go pro, and then when you did kind of want to go pro back then, what was the path to go pro back then versus what it is now?
No, really good question. So for those that might not know, if you kind of rewind to when I started playing 17, 18, there wasn't a pro division at the time. So everything was basically what they called advanced, right? So the stuff you might see on ESPN back in 17, 18, there were no pro divisions, but it was right around, I want to say it was 18 where they started pro division only for doubles. And that kind of was what got it going. And now you're talking about players being under contract and specific events to pull in pros. And then in 19, it blew up. It went from just pro doubles to now you've got singles, doubles. And then you look at it now and you've got all these different pro events, right? You got seniors, women's doubles, men, open singles, all of this stuff. So back then, you're trying to get this pro division built up. So really there was the main way of qualifying back then to really get your first 256 pros were conference standings. So if you did any events, it goes back a couple years. I want to say it was the top 16 players from each conference qualified to be a pro. So through my play with Mile High Cornhole, I qualified through that conference qualifier. And that was the main way that really dumped everybody into the pro division. That's kind of what got it all started. Really, when the list came out, never even thought about going pro. The list came out, I think I was like 6th or something out of the 16 out of all out of the entire conference. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. That was about as far as it went. I was like,
there you go.
I wasn't planning on doing anything with that. So I got to give props to that same uncle that took me to invited me to the Nuggets game. He was like, we're doing this, right, bro? And I was like, what are you talking about? He was like, we're doing this. So fortunately, my uncle he owns a trucking company here in Colorado called GP Express, Bronson Trucking. And immediately he's like, we got a sponsor. He's very successful at that business. So, I mean, how do you say no? You got an immediate sponsor. It's going to cover all of your travel. One of your best boys on the planet is going to be your pro partner. So, I had to run it by the boss at home, make sure that the wife was cool with that. And I'm like, what do you think about this? This is kind of crazy, but this game I've been playing, what do you think? So all parties were kind of thumbs up, and that's kind of what got it going, man. It was one of the best decisions I made besides, family and my career and my education in the past. It's really changed the past 5 years of my life. 100%.
Oh yeah. And going off of one thing that you said in there, so I was just listening to your last episode of Around the ACL, and Trey made a comment of, the way we had the 256 pros, and then you guys were talking about that top 100 number, and you're talking about how if you're in the top 100, you qualify for next year. And then Trey was talking about, well, we basically did that as a way to keep cycling people in and out to get that core group of players. And he's like, now we're kind of getting that core group of players or over 100 players that are all qualified to like re-go in, and then maybe having a smaller rookie class. How do you see that continuing to evolve? Do you see it going back to maybe now you keep top 200 and you only got 50 rotating in and out, or and it's all on the world's gauntlet? You got to earn your way differently. Like, how do you see this evolving past, where it already has?
Yeah. So what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is really where it's going to evolve is it's going to be easier to stay and harder to get in is what I'm hearing. So for those that might not know, there's a number of ways to qualify. So as a pro, the idea is that most of the pro division stays and you're rolling in and off a few players. But if you were the top 100 in singles, you automatically qualify as a pro. Again, if you're top 50 in doubles, you both automatically apply as a pro. And then you can get in through open events. So for those that might not know, there's 16-ish open events that happen throughout a season. You show up, you attend, you score your points, you get points based on where you placed. You can do local stuff to earn points, and they're different bracketed level of points. Open's going to give you the fattest amount of points at once. Regionals, conferences. Anyways, at the end of the year, the top 24 people in that open event will qualify to be a pro. Then every conference, so I think there's 13-ish conferences, every conference will hold a tournament that will have one winner. So you'll get one entry in from a conference winner, and a singles division makes it pro. And then there's an application process. But ultimately, I think the application process starts to do this, where in the past we would, have like, I think it was, I want to say it was like close to 60 maybe came in through the application. That's going to start shrinking down to something much lower.
Yeah.
So easier to stay, harder to get in is where the future of it's going.
And a crazy comment based on that point system you're talking about. Corbin, I don't know if you saw the post today, but I know Anthony saw it as well, is that Jimmy Humans is 2 local points away from maxing out every single category, which is just bonkers.
That kid is gangster.
Oh my God.
Kid is gangster.
Dude, it's just,
he is so good.
I've hung out with him a bunch in Iowa and stuff, and had the pleasure of commentating his final game where he hit like 9 airmails in a row to win with Emily Downer. And there's just the year that he's having this year is just insane. Just watching him play is just like, and then he took down Matt Guy throwing like a 10-5 or something in the last national. Especially in throwing in my opinion, one of the least hole friendly carpet bags, like the most block oriented carpet bag.
It's insane.
Just going hole for hole with anybody, airmail and like nothing is just nutty to me. But little side note, but yeah, I saw that today. It was crazy.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, you talk about one of the highest IQs in the game. If you ever have a chance to just rap with humans for 5-10 minutes just talking cornhole, that dude has got a brilliant mind on the IQ side. He's a legit dude. I'm a big Jimmy Humans fan.
We had him on the podcast with him and Cobb, and that was like half the questions we had was like how do you view this? And he was talking about doubles, and he had the most mind-blowing thing. He's like, the problem that carpet players have as doubles teams is they both play the block and roll play style. And he's like, you both can't play block and roll all the time because it's too risky. You give up too many big rounds. He's like, so the way that we play is if Cobb's rolls on fire, he goes block roll, I go bag for bag. If Cobb's struggling to roll, I go block airmail, he goes bag for bag. But you need to have one person that's always negating somebody or negating their hot player, and that's the reason that you can have success. And just the way he's talking about all this cerebral thinking that you're just like, like, and the funniest comment that I had from that was, I love that he said, whoever's having an off day, they just make all the bags and don't play dirty. I was like, so your off day is you just make every bag. That's your off day. It's just a different level of mind thinking. But yeah, I love talking to Jimmy. Big fan. Biggest arms in cornhole too, by the way. He's jacked.
Absolutely.
Oh, dude,
I'm
loaded.
I'm competing. I'm competing with him. I'm trying.
But transition a little bit into maybe where a ton of our viewers have seen you, which is the YouTube thing, the Cornhole Science. You got the Cornhole Science page on Facebook. A lot of really great information about shot types, cornhole in general. Just a really cool place to go and get info. But Corbin, why don't you take the section on Cornhole Science?
Absolutely, man. I mean, and that's where I first saw you, Anthony, was cornhole science videos, of course. It's you Google anything about cornhole and you're gonna pop up, on YouTube, whatever. So I love the man cave, by the way. That's awesome. The best room. I would love to have that here. It'd be fantastic just to have in my house. Where did the entire idea from Cornhole Science come from?
Yeah, it really came, if we go back to that 2017, 18, when I said I was just recording a bunch of videos. So I started I think it was about a year in, I had compiled enough information where I felt comfortable sharing it with other people so people started to just come to me to ask me, new players would come in and everyone's like, oh, go talk to Anthony. Like he'll explain that for you or break it down. So teaching people what you're kind of trying to teach yourself really helps you to digest it better, I think. I mean, when you're explaining something, it helps you to organize your thoughts and break it down into a way that not only helps you to understand it better, but other people understand it. So that kind of became a thing in 2018. I just kind of became someone who was working with a lot of people in Colorado on improving their game, whether it was from technique or strategy discussions or whatever. Yep. So that happened all through 18. And then it was 19 when I went into the pro division. I started to do the same thing at the pro level. So not only now instead of bouncing ideas off with local guys, I was able to really bounce ideas off with some of the best players in the game. The Noah Wootens, the Eric Davises, these guys that do amazing thing, the Jamie Grahams, the Matt guys, really just talking through their game to help me kind of build my knowledge. And it got to a point where it was like, you know what? Maybe other people will find value in that. Why keep this? Let's share it with everyone so that people can, so we can kind of all learn this game together. So it wasn't long ago. It was like a year, maybe like a year and 4 or 5 months ago, where I was like, I'm just going to create this Facebook group. Maybe a couple people will find value in it. I couldn't believe the desire to want for more content. So yeah. I dropped a couple of videos, thinking, it was just for fun, I'll just put it out there, and it just blew up. The DMs were blowing up, the likes started blowing up. I'm like, wow, okay, all right, so people obviously want this kind of information. So I just kept dropping more and more. And really, I would really love to put a lot more content out there. But the reality is, Eddie, as you know,
it's time, man.
It's in your free time that it's free time from your non-free time, you know, like you just, so it's I would love to put more content. Maybe it's something that happens in the future when maybe you have some actual funding around it and, you know, a good production value behind it, you know, where you get good cameras, you get good lighting, and you actually put forth good training content. If that happens, I'm ready for it. But it's slow. It's really slow. Like I got to the point right now, especially with all of my other duties with the ACL blowing up. I mean, I'm, you know, barely dropping a video every couple of months, and I feel bad, but it's all just for the love of the game.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's
I have to let something go.
Oh yeah, that's the reason we do it. And I mean, I totally agree with you that the starving nature for content is there in Cornhole right now. Like I made a video 4 months ago of how to throw the bag flat, right?
Yes.
And that video gets 500 to 600 views per day still every day for
Isn't that crazy?
Forever. And it's just because how many people are joining the game right now, and it's like, oh, I saw this on TV. How do you throw it flat? And it's just like, and I heard a stat from somebody saying that like 10,000 people a month are finding competitive cornhole, like either going to their first blind draw ever or finding out about pro bags or like out of the backyard, right? And that's per month. And it's just the game's going to keep growing and growing and growing, and that's why, like, you know, this podcast gets good drive because people are like, I don't know, I just want to hear what pros are like. I want to hear what people are like. What's about Cornhole? It's just becoming this larger community. And I think a lot of people are like us, analytical, looking for more information, things to learn from. I mean, look at Derek King and now Jamie Graham doing some coaching programs now.
Yeah.
And I don't know why there isn't coaches already, like for players. I mean, like mid in between after a loss being like, hey, you're leaning forward. You're not doing that. You know, just like little things. I think that's where we're going to see this go.
And it is evolving. I'm working with quite a few pros now at their level. So even the pros are looking for coaching. Oh, yeah. You know, I mean, the pros are looking for how can I take my game to the next level? I mean, look at the mentals. There's players going through psychology and working with, you know, with people who understand how to focus and deal with nerves and stuff like that. And I'm working with some pros on breaking their game down on, you know, what do you see in my stuff? Because they're all wanting that edge. They're all wanting to move up the ranks. So it's really cool to see that level at the pro level. Yeah, and when we talk to pros, I would say we've asked the same question to every single pro we've asked for is what do you think is the difference between an advanced player and a pro? And almost every single one says either consistency or mental, and that's the only two differences. He's just like, you have to be able to shoot 10 for 12 hours straight. And you have to be able to sit for 2 hours and come to a board against some of the best players in the world and shoot a 10. And you have to be able to like deal with, you know, a mistake or just not make, like mentally just not make mistakes. Like you have to be able to zone in just constantly and just do what you know how to do every time. He's like, all of us can get to a practice board and make 100 in a row. You know, it's like, but then you get on a main stage court and it's just a completely different ball game. But exactly.
Yeah, and I have adapted bag game, by the way. So if you ever say bag game in the live stream, that's from you as well. Nice. I gotta call it a bag game.
Bag game.
But go ahead, Corbin. Sorry, I'm going to take your
time. No, you're good, man. You're good. Tangents, it happens. So I love the backstory that you kind of just got into it from the get-go and then just decided to make something of it, which I like. Moving on to your shots. So, you know, you definitely show a ton of different shots, you know, how to play. Here's the roll bag. Here's whatever. How long does it actually take you to like perfect that shot before you start recording it?
Yeah. So if we're talking about producing content, honestly, shots are the easiest part. If anyone's
really?
done any, if anyone's done any kind of production where you're editing and overlaying and arranging, oh my gosh,
dude, yeah.
Dude, the software side of it, the production side of it is so lengthy. So to put out a solid video, and I would say solid is anything longer than 5 minutes. Anything longer than 5 minutes, I'm looking at 10 hours at least for a 5-minute video.
Yep.
I put out like a 15, 16-minute video, maybe 20-minute video. That thing took me like 16 hours.
Oh my gosh.
And I would say 45 minutes of it was on the boards and the rest of it was in the office. Like it is intense to put all that together and kind of make it look good. I mean, if you're okay with putting out just low quality content, it's easy, right? But I don't know. I just want to put out the best possible content with the equipment I have, right? I'm not big invested in, I do have some lights and basic cameras, but I'm doing what I can with the money I have. Cause let's face it, I'm not making any money off of this, guys. And Eddie, you're probably in the same boat. This is all just for the love of the game. $0. So
yeah, I tell people all the time, those vlogs that I make are like between 40 minutes to an hour for each one, usually, or like lengthwise that the video's out. So people message me, they're like, hey, where's the vlogs at? It's been like 3 weeks. I was like, dude, it takes me around 20 hours to edit this vlog. So like, and I don't just edit it like the clips. I edit the clips and voice over every single clip for a straight hour to like to tie it all together and then transition.
Exactly.
So I'm like, dude, this is like 3 hours of recording at a blind draw for fun and 20 hours of sitting in my room after work editing. Yeah. So
that is awesome.
That's why I make you edit all my stuff, man.
Yeah, he sends me his videos to edit. He's like,
hey, I'm working on it. Computer's coming this week. We're getting there. We're getting there, I swear. So, I mean, like with a roll bag, let's say, I've watched a roll bag video. Did you know how to do it prior to your video?
No, actually, the roll bag came up on us quick. That was one where I realized, hey, I need to shove some content out quick because people wanted it. I mean,
they still do.
Yeah,
they still do for sure.
Yeah, it's still out there, and it might have been the first roll bag or content out for the roll bag video. But so I had to kind of learn that shot quickly. That wasn't something that I had developed, years beforehand. So actually, at the beginning of that video, I reached out to some of the pros because I'm like, hey, we should get the best in the world to be sharing with the people, not just some random guy in his basement, like sharing what he thinks, but, what does Tony Smith think? What does Eric Davis think? Noah Wooten. I hit up all three of those guys. Hunter Thorne, Tay Harris in Colorado, who was throwing a really good roll bag at the same time. So those guys were really gracious and offered up all the information. And I tried to just compile each of their kind of point of view. And that's what was presented in the video. So the technique and the idea behind it was all 5 or 6 of those, but actually having to throw the roll bag, I had to develop that pretty quick, like in a week or 2.
Oh yeah. I mean,
well, that's impressive.
Yeah. Me and Corbin talk all the time about, People are like, oh man, Corbin's got a good roll bag, right? He's got a good roll bag because of his videos. Like, you don't know how many hours I spent outside just throwing roll bags to try to get it look good on camera, man. It's hard for me.
Yeah, and as a technician, I look back on that video and my roll bag looks like shit. So it's like, I was just, people got the idea. It wasn't about me. Yeah, it wasn't about me making a roll bag. It was about the logic or the concept behind how people can do it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, do you use like the shots that you put in your videos, or are you more of a slide block airmail kind of guy?
No, 100%. I use the shots. And so for me, and really, this is something that the pros are all starting to realize too, is you can't use those shots as a crutch. You can't use them. You really have to use situational strategy.
Absolutely.
There's a right time to throw a roll bag. There's a right time to throw an airmail, etc. So I'm one who will use that roll bag when it's absolutely necessary. Now, my roll bag is, if you look at the top, 20 players in the league in a roll bag, they're special. I mean, what they can do with a roll bag is special. Oh, yeah. So just being able to physically get a bag to roll over a bag doesn't make you a good roll bagger. I am not a good roll bagger. If you look at consistency wise and predictability, because so many times, you'll think you got a nice roll bag and it's completely rolling away from the hole. These guys are so consistent in their spot and where the bag ends up ultimately. I'm not in that category. So I have to use it situationally. So you're constantly running the probability based on your specific skills. So I use it situationally.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
He made me think of Jimmy Humans again too, man. In Iowa, I'm talking to him and he's like, because I talked to him beforehand and he's like, I'm a 65% airmailer. So the way I look at it is if I've made 3 in a row, I'm going to miss the 4th one. So it changes the way that I think about how I'm going to throw my airmail. And I was like, so then after the finals, I went to him and I was like, so after you made the 8th airmail in a row, what was going through your head? And he's like,
I'm not shooting the 9th.
He goes, probability was low, but I had to make it. I was like, all right. But it's just funny you being like, I'm going through the probabilities. So I'm like, literally that's what human says too. It's hilarious.
That's awesome.
So do you have any tips for new players as far as, bag selection or shot selection even? I mean, you just said situationally use those shots, which I 100% agree with. I'm not rolling as soon as there's a blocker in front of me, right? Like for a new player, would you suggest trying to learn rolls and stuff like that?
So for I guess the first thing I would ask a new player is there's 2 types of players in this game, right? There's I'm here to have fun, and there's I'm here to get better, and I'm here to be the best player. So you really got to separate those people, because I would give different advice to those people. Sure. Let's say a guy comes in or a gal comes in and they're like, you know what? I just want to be competitive. I just want to be able to hang. This isn't something I'm going to do. I would put a fast bag in their hand and, with good hole friendliness, and they don't need to have a nice flat bag. And I would say, all right, just throw this. Right.
Yeah.
Someone who's going to be trying to be like us, who gets deep into this hole of cornhole and you want to be the best you can be, I would 100% put a sticky ass bag in their hand as soon as possible.
Yep.
Go old school, like make them throw a slide right for like 3 or 4 months, something that's going to force them to throw a flat bag, something that's going to show the inefficiencies and the imperfections in their bag. You want to see, because someone who's going to be a good player at one point wants to see how a bag reacts when it's loaded or tilted in certain directions. So by throwing a slide right, not only is it going to make you over time get your bag flat, but you're going to see how a bag reacts at certain tilt positions. So that would be my advice number 1. If you're one of those people that is looking to be diehard, I mean, you're going to suck for like 3 or 4 months. It's going to be horrible. And you're not going to win a lot, but you're going to come out of that 3 to 4 months and you're going to put a different bag in your hand, or something that maybe is a little bit faster, something that's a little bit more friendly, and you're going to be so much better at the game. So that would be advice for sure.
Yep. I love that. I tell people the same thing all the time. Like, how do I throw a flat bag? I'm like, buy carpet.
Throw carpet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Literally, it's
throw
like
a pro
carpet.
advantage.
It will tell you what you're doing wrong immediately. So yeah, it's tough. And on bag choice, what's your go-to? I mean, I see all the bags behind you, but if you have like your top 2 or 3 bags, what are you going to go for?
Yeah, so this is actually kind of fun. I'm in a bit of a transition. So as a student of the game, I'm changing things right now for me. So I'm actually committing. So up to this point, I've only thrown slow bags. I was the last guy off of slide rights, I think, in Colorado. I refused to let that bag go.
In the world, yeah.
Yeah, in the world. And then I moved right into Pro Advantage, and I have thrown Pro Advantage until December 31st of last year. So I decided for 2022, if I'm going to be a true student of the game, I need to learn this fast side of the game. What does it mean to be a fast bag player? What's happening differently? How does a bag react differently? So since January 1st, I switched to all slides, just because it was a bag I had. I've seen a lot of success with, Jay Rubin and Jamie Graham and some of these guys in the past. I didn't want to patch on my hand. I didn't want that at all. So I've been throwing all, and let me tell you, it is a completely different game.
Oh yeah. Have you tried the 2.0s?
I've just a couple down and backs. They're nothing crazy I've committed to.
Really good.
They're pretty solid.
Here's my thing with the 2.0s, right? Because a lot of people throw Surefires, Typhoons, all those mocks, right? The 2.0s are the only ones that use all slide game changer bead fill, right? So if you're an all slide guy and you're comfortable with that really beady bag, a lot of people don't like the way those beads feel. If you like those beads and you're like, oh, all sides are a little too fast, that 2.0 just like slots in like cake. And it's the same fast side, so it's the same feeling on the thumb. It is like the easiest transition if the boards are too.
Okay. I've tried that. Like I got Typhoon somewhere on the wall. I've tried those. But yeah, interesting on the 2.0.
Yeah. And I found the 2.0 is more hole friendly than the rest because of that bead. It's the least hand comfiness because it's so beady. Yep. But if you're used to all slides, it is hole friendly as heck for a 5-speed bag.
Oh, good to know. Good to know. I'm gonna have to mess with it a little bit. But yeah, man, it's amazing. So the coolest thing is you have really high PPRs. You know, I've never been, I have never been a high P. I have never even given a shit about PPRs. You know, it was like, I am just trying to do my game. And as long as I'm scoring, I don't care if it's an 8-7 or a 10-12. I don't care.
DPR. Yep.
All about DPR, man.
Yep.
So that's been kind of fun is throwing having a lot of personal bests in tournaments on the stat side.
Sure.
And I'm winning. I won with carpet. I'm winning with this. But the most important part is I'm learning, man. I think I'm going to drop a video on the difference between the two because there's a lot of cool stuff I think we can share with people.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I think the biggest transition between a slow bag and a fast bag, once you start throwing a fast bag all the time, is like the amount of get around shots you can do without thinking you could do them. Like when a bag's just in the way, you could just throw it near the bag and it'll just go around the bag. That you're like, oh man, with carpet, you're thinking airmail, you're thinking roll, you're thinking block behind. You don't even think that's an option, to slide around like that. So it's just a completely different shot.
Yeah, so the way I'm starting to describe it in content, whether it's broadcasting or in Cornhole Science videos, is I'm going to start breaking it up into a contact shot and a non-contact shot. So with Pro Advantage, all those sticky bags, you can get around bags with non-contact. You're either cutting around, you're rolling over. Mm-hmm. What I'm finding with these fast bags is you can get around with contact. And again, I only have one data point, which is all slides, because that's really what I'm working is. But I can attack a blocker slightly off center and on the slick side of that. And just because it probably has something to do with the friction that's going on, its ability to be hole friendly means it can collapse on itself a little bit easier. It will just work its way on a contact shot. It'll work its way around a blocker, and it doesn't need to hit a hole center like a Pro Advantage. It just has to catch a hole, and then you could work that hooking motion where you kind of toilet bowl in there. It's a different game, man. It is definitely.
This last weekend at a tournament I just played in, I was playing against a guy throwing Series Vipers. He throws a fast side Series Viper, and it was a moment that I wish I had on camera because you'd have to see it to believe it. It had, I bet you, 2 beads of the corner on the side of the hole, and over a 40-second time span with no bags hitting the board, it moved all the way back into the hole and went in. And our whole team was like, it was the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, that's no other bag would do that. It's just like,
it's ridiculous.
But there's a reason why I would say 75% of the top pros throw fast bags, because it's easier over the course of a whole day to make more bags in the hole.
It is easier. You have to work to throw a slow bag. It is work.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funner. To me, it's funner.
It's way more fun.
I agree. Like the reason I play like the surefire types is because I could throw blocks and make it dirty, but they're more hole friendly than carpet. It's kind of like the same thing as carpet, but you can do some of those shots once in a while if you need to. But yeah. The fast bag lifestyle, man. There's nothing. Me and Corbin joke about this all the time. If you see a 75-year-old dude walk up to the board with Gen 1 game changers, you're screwed.
You're done.
You're screwed.
You're done.
Like he's going around every bag you got. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what happens. But that's actually a good transition to the emergence of new shots, because obviously the ACL. I mean, I would say the cut bag, the roll bag, maybe now the penguin. Which if anybody hasn't seen the penguin yet, people are figuring out how to bounce one of their bags behind a bag over another bag. It's the most ridiculous thing. But with all these new shots coming into play, how do you think it's changed the game, and how do you think the game will continue to evolve? Is it all just everybody's got to learn everything now? Like, do you think the old guard's falling behind? How is the game changing?
Yeah, so I guess I'll approach it with you don't need those shots to win. Matt Guy's got 2 shots. He'll run bags, and he's got an airmail, and he is the best in the world with 2 shots. So you do not need all those. Now, there are some situations where Matt Guy is in where he can't do either one of those. He can't airmail, and he can't run a bag. And I think those are some situations where and his stats are so far off the charts. It's not like he needs more help than he does. But if he did have a couple more shots in his bag, in his back pocket, that he would, even if he just used them a couple times a tournament, but maybe he's kind of squeezing a couple more points out of that, it could help his game, but you don't need it. And the problem, or the key with all of these shots is if you're not really, really good at them, they're going to hurt you.
Yes.
You have to have those shots. With slide shots, you can err a little off your line. You could be a little deep. You could be a little shallow and still find the hole. on these complex shots, if you're not on point, I mean, I don't know what word I'm trying to look for. You're a statistician, whatever word I'm looking for, but
your percentage chance is going to go down if you throw these difficult shots. I mean, just over time. Like if you shot nothing but airmails the whole term, you're not going to score as high as if you slide. I mean,
what I'm thinking is like defects, like a linear chart, defects per million or whatever. Anyways, your defects or those few times where you're off really hurt you.
Sure.
So I don't know. It's really tough. Like, I mean, if you look at a Tony Smith right now, who is one of the, in my opinion, top 2-3 in the planet at the dirty game, he's really struggling right now in the league. Eric Davis isn't top 10 anymore. You look at some of these players, Cody Henderson, who doesn't throw as fancy and flashy shots, but he plays a dirty style game. He's 76th in the league, so it's like, you're right. You're kind of looking at all of these players. Now we're seeing a lot of success with these, like, I don't know what we call them, but like hybrid bags or kind of these between bags, whether it's a 2.0 or a Surefire. I mean, if you look at Alex Rawls and maybe Trey Birchfield, or some of these kind of middle speeded bags, we're seeing a lot of success with those because you could still do a lot of those shots that we're talking about. It might not cut as hard or it might not roll over a stack of 3, but you're still able to pull off some of these shots. We're seeing some success with those. So I think if I were going to say, where's the game going to evolve? It's going to evolve more to the hybrid bag. I think we might see a lot of people going with that tweener.
And I think we're already starting to see a lot of that too. I mean, you see the sure shot boys were throwing the locos, but they're transitioning to the strikers, which is another sure shot or surefire mock. You got the surefire guys, you got the all side 2.0s, you got Ryan Windsor's even throwing typhoons, and he'll roll typhoons, because I was talking to him about it. He's like, I love my platinums, but the typhoons just fall in the hole easier. It's just easier over the course of a whole day. And I think that middling ground is kind of where, unless you're a pure Matthew Cree killer, I only throw Vikings and I throw the stickiest Vikings that exist and bounce every single bag up the board, a lot of them are transitioning to the middle bag. So I could totally agree with that. Do you think, because they kind of accomplish, I hear the saying a lot, a roll bag is safer than an airmail because if you miss, it's on the board. But then Trey made a good point of, but if you notice, if they miss, it's almost never going to be collectible. It's always missing off to the side a little bit or maybe over the back. Yes, it's still on the board, but it's still kind of out of play or maybe given a bumper. Do you think a good roll bag is a replacement at all for a good airmail?
See, this one really depends on the scenario and what you're faced with. Let's say you're on your first bag. Guy throws a first bag block, and you've got, your first shot in your hand. I don't mind a roll bag in that situation over an airmail, just because there's 6 more bags coming behind it. So if you end up in a stack, or if you end up on the other side of the bag in a block, or if you end up, like you said, in a non-collectible position off to the hole, there's 6 more bags ripping behind you where you could collect. But when you get later in the round, like definitely on last bag or the last few bags in the round, I kind of favor an airmail more in that situation. You're going to have more drag opportunities. At that point, it might be kind of muddy and you're sacrificing 1 point off. If you miss an airmail, you're just missing 1 point instead of boarding it. So I think it's really scenario based. It really comes down to percentage. I mean, if you're not a Tony Smith, Eric Davis, these guys who can roll at Jimmy, you said Jimmy Human said he's a 65% roll airmailer. If you're not rolling at that level of percentage, then stay with your airmail, dude. Yeah. Like, don't roll if you're not at that level.
Do you think these shots have bred a more aggressive game? And what I mean by more aggressive is maybe more risk-taking of a game rather than, or do you think there's some players that maybe are struggling because they're not doing the smart thing or pushing through when they should or blocking behind when they should, and they're always going for these high-risk shots?
Yeah, I think we're at the point where, and I think that's going to make a turn, but I think it's exciting, right? The rollback comes out, the penguin comes out, I've got these cuts. It's exciting. You want to use them in play. So it's really hurting people, but I think it's going to kind of pull back. People are going to realize like, hey, I need to use that at the right time and be less risky all the time. So I think right now we're at a peak of where everyone's trying to do all these fancy shots and it's costing them games. I think that kind of pulls back and then you see more situational shooting.
Okay. And then you got people like Cree Killer that just roll every single bag and win a national.
Doesn't matter.
It's like whatever.
Yeah, so Cree Killer's a little bit different. What's cool about Cree Killer is I wouldn't even call it a roll bag. So I started calling this a lift bag like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago. But what he's able to do is, so he's a right-handed player. If I were to put a block, just say this is a block. As a right-hander, he's going to kind of throw this tilt with a little backload. So it's almost like a combination of tilt and roll position. And what it does is when the bag hits, it smacks just down the left side and it just lifts up and he kind of cruises over the block like this. It never actually goes into a roll or a momentum roll, and it never really pushes through the bag. It just lifts that left side and he's able to run over bags almost like a bike. In car racing, when you come around a corner and you're going too fast and you get up on two wheels, I think they call that bicycling. He's almost bicycling a bag. So it just kind of comes up like this and he comes over the block like that. Mm-hmm. And he's finding what's nice with that is it has a straight line to the hole. You know, sometimes when you're rolling, you kind of roll right or you roll left. You know, it's harder to control which direction it's going to roll, but he's got real consistent line to the hole just by lifting that corner. So it's, I think that's why he's having a lot of success with that.
Yeah, well, he definitely had success in the last national, that's for sure. Winning the whole thing, really. And we just had him on the podcast last week, and the thing that blew my mind the most was how calm he looked on TV. Like he just looked like he just was throwing bags. He's just like, whatever.
Dude, it is not just TV. That dude barely breaks like anything in a match. You're like, it's almost like he is just straight face. Like he'd be one of the best poker players ever, man. He is just like no emotion all the time. Yeah. So I think he was made, maybe he was feeling it inside nerves, but it never showed. It never showed in the match.
And so with the ACL opportunities, one of the coolest opportunities I think is the Around the ACL, which if you guys haven't heard of it's on the ACL digital network. The way that Trey explained it was, you know, they got Around the Horn and they got all these sports shows for all these other sports, but Cornhole didn't have anything of that. So you guys wanted to make something that was kind of like, how do we go in the competitive side and like give a little update every week about what's going on in competitive and have a little banter for the sport if the sport's going to grow. So where did kind of the opportunity for you with the ACL and the Around the ACL thing come from?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of built up to that. So I talked about starting kind of the pro thing in 19, and then that transition to Cornhole Science. And then as the content got out there, and around that time, we didn't talk about back in 18, I started broadcasting similar to what you see now. We were one of the first clubs. If there's another club out there that beat us, I don't know of them, but it could have happened. One of the first clubs to have dual cameras, the dual camera setup, you know, with the computer and the OBS software and all that stuff. So I got our club Mile High Cornhole set up. So I started that content back in 18, and Trey, obviously with being one of the only clubs out there, it quickly got to his queue somehow. But so he saw that out there. And then when I became pro, I obviously saw him in Rock Hill at one of the events, and he was like, "Hey man, what do you think about getting on ESPN3 today?" And I was like, "What?" You know, I was like, "Let's go." You know, I'm one of those guys where it's like, if it sounds fun, I'm going to say yes. I'm not going to, you know, turn down an opportunity to do something. So that's where it kind of, you know, evolved into that content. And then I started getting into the USA Cornhole. We doing the NBC stuff and some of the TV broadcasts. So it's kind of been building up to this show, I think. And with the whole analytical side, you know, it feeds into a lot of the analysis that goes into the around the ACL. So that's kind of where the opportunity arose. It came from Cornhole Science feeding into the commentary, and it was just kind of a natural kind of roll right into that show.
Yeah, and I definitely think your personality fits in the show really well. Again, talking about the analytics stuff, and that kind of goes into like what goes into preparing for a show like that. I mean, obviously you have a lot of stuff in your head, like you just seeing, like you seem to just have a lot of information, same way I do. Thoughts just roll out, but I'm sure just like me, you do a little prep. You got your notes set aside, things you want to talk about. Like, what do you go into when you prep for a show like that?
A lot of prep. So I hate Trey. This guy freaking has all of Cornhole in his head. Actually, so we're on episode 23, 24. It was a couple episodes ago. We were getting ready to go on, and he was like, we've never even talked about it before. It's never been talked about. But he says, yeah, this is the longest I've ever prepped for a show. I prepped for 45 minutes. And I'm like, I hate you, man. So I average 7 to 10 hours of prep going into that. Now, a lot of it is watching, especially when we have tournaments over the weekend. I'd say there's, 3 hours of watching matches, but I basically write an entire script So I write a full-blown script. It's usually about 10 pages long, and it just helps me to organize my thoughts, and I'll read it over and over, and I'll practice it. So then when we get into the show, it's just coming across as clean as possible. Now, a lot of that time isn't just writing, it's digging into data. So I want to provide people with accurate stats. PPRs need to be clean. Where people are positioned in their ranks. There's a lot of bracket analysis. I got to be able to say, oh, hey, Creek Killer and Tanner Halbert ran into each other at Nationals #1 in bracket, in bracket play. That requires, I want to see all that history. So a lot of it is building up tools where I can go back and reference. So little things like getting a full list of every single championship so that I can go in and quickly filter how many times has Damon Dennis won a singles or a seniors tournament. I want to be able to go in real quick, bloop, and then get a list. He's won 5 doubles seniors championships and four singles senior. I want to be able to have that data for people. So a lot of it was just mining out a lot of information. And then when the data rolls in, like you come off a national, and we go into a show, there's a lot of data to analyze. You have the women's doubles, the seniors. I mean, all of these different events, who played who shot well, looking at stats. So a lot of work goes into it just because I want to give people, I think we're fortunate on that show because we have access to the data.
Yeah, I was just going to say, where do you get all this data? Because I want this stuff. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, it's a unique position to be in. You got to take advantage of it because it's for the viewers, man. I mean, we're basically trying to package up this and give people stuff to talk about, and also to kind of baseline themselves, like what's it going to take to be a pro? What do I need to be able to do to be a pro? So this is, it's data direct from the master document. So you're getting real information. So I want to give that to people.
Speaking of what it's going to be like to be a pro, though, I remember a couple episodes ago, you guys were talking about the average PPR last season versus the average PPR this season. It's like a full point higher to be a pro. It's like, it was like
Nuts.
it's like 8.58, and this year it's like 9.7 is the median PPR for a pro. It's just like you look at any other because when the max is 12 and it goes from 8.6 to 9.7, that's the percentage increase that no other sport sees that big of an improvement in 1 year. I mean, that's just ridiculous in terms of quality of player.
It is ridiculous. And just to kind of give people a data point, if you're someone out there, we'll just go do a half a PPR. For example, someone who throws a 9 PPR versus a 9.5 PPR, 2 completely different levels of play. It doesn't seem like a lot, but someone who can average a half a point more per round is levels above that player. I mean, it's huge. So to go a point in a year is insane. I mean, what we're seeing at the pro level right now is just kind of nuts, man.
Yeah, and I love that. I think the craziest stat the last week when you guys were talking was that the teams events is that all the 12 captains for the team event that got picked because they were the top 12 ranked players last year, none of them would be captains this season.
Isn't that crazy? It's
Like,
crazy.
That's how many.
And that's why it's worth doing all the homework, because this is the kind of stuff that pops out when I'm digging through these cool little like stats that people can look at, or these cool little talking points. So I think it's worth the time to put in because it really gives like a cool picture of
Oh, yeah. No, I love watching your show. I pop it on whenever I think about it and stuff. It's really enjoyable for me. I love all the sports. I grew up watching Sports Center, Around the Horn, all that kind of stuff. So it just kind of feeds into that for me. So one thing, though, about that show, which I asked Trey about this, but I'll ask you too, is it difficult to talk negatively about a player in terms of, I know it's important that you have to like talk about, if this person's struggling, because that's what goes into having a good sports show, is you have to have the positives and the negatives. But knowing these people on a personal level, is it difficult to draw that line of like, you got to tell them that they're having a terrible season and you got to say it kind of thing?
So no. And the reason is at least for me, if I am talking about someone's difficulty, it is not an opinion. It is backed by data.
Sure.
So if I came out and said Jimmy Humans sucks, and then I didn't have anything to back it up, absolutely, that's unwarranted. Like that, I deserve to be lashed by Jimmy Humans. But if you can come out and say, man, look at this trend, where we had his PPR has reduced by this much over this many whatevers. He's 0 and 6. You're providing data to back it up. No, and I think I think at the pro level, you need to be able to deal with that. I mean, you're a pro, right? So if you talk about only good stuff all the time, it gets boring. You know, you have to call, and it's how you do it too. I mean, we're not out there to bash anybody. We're just talking about what's actually happening. So I had to do that recently. You said Schermerhorn is out of your area. Didn't you say, Corbin? Yep. Okay. Yep. So yeah. So in doubles, I mean, they were one of the few teams that ended up in a tier 2 at the Opens. And these were guys that then they've even showed it. This is before that have the ability to be top 20, top 25 pros. So when they end up in a tier 2, you got to talk about it. Because what happened right after we talked about it, they came out to the Nationals and finished like 5th. So what's really cool about it, what I love about talking about a struggle is being able to come back and talk about a success coming off of a struggle. So of course I wanted in that very next episode to give them props on rallying back after a tier 2 show out in an Open to a top 5 position at the Nationals. So it's part of it. I mean, you have to be okay with it.
And I love that you used Jimmy Humans sucks as your opinion because they literally have shirts that say Jimmy Humans doesn't suck.
Oh, do they?
They made shirts that say Jimmy Humans doesn't suck. But where do you want to see this show go? Like, is there any goals you guys have long term? Is this something you want to continue to grow and get on other platforms? Like, what's kind of the long term goal with the show?
I think we're just trying to fill it out right now. I mean, it's the first year, you know. Ultimately, I think it's something you need in the sport, right? It's again, because the ACL is putting out their own podcast, you're getting the best and most accurate information and data out there. I mean, you're going to have, you know, what's coming up that most people don't know about. Like just today on the episode, we talked about international play, and we're about to go to the Netherlands, you know, like it's good to have access to what's coming, all the data, you know, and drop that content for people out there. So where's it going to go? We're going to run it all year and see what happens. But I think the feedback from the Cornhole community is people are liking it. We're obviously going to adjust as feedback comes in. You know, do people want interviews? Do people not want interviews? Would you like different segments? So I think we're just kind of learning on the fly, but ultimately the whole goal is to give people accurate and good content and maybe stuff that no one else knows yet.
Awesome. Well, Corbin, why don't you go a little bit about ACL Pro stuff?
Yeah, let's go into your little pro career a little bit here. Everyone wants to be pro that plays, right? Well, not everyone, but a lot of people that play, they're like, hey, anyone can be a pro, right? Just keep throwing, get better, whatever. In your experience, what are some things that people don't understand about being pro?
What they don't understand. Well, I would definitely tell people to prepare for the travel part of it. You know, when you kind of get involved, you know, it's just like, oh, I'm going to be playing cornhole. But hey, it's a commitment. It's a commitment to get to the tournaments, to compete at the highest level. Definitely people struggling with streams and broadcasts. So you can take someone who just fills the hole up in their basement, and then you put them not even on like an ESPN broadcast, but just on a secondary live stream court. Woo, that camera adds a lot of weight. All of a sudden, that 1 pound bag, it feels like 5 pounds, right? So for people out there, I would say from a struggle standpoint, take any if someone wants to record a game live on their phone behind you, let it happen. Because it's going to get you used. And that's where my, you know, we have 5 pros out of Colorado, you know, the Tay Harrises, the Yeti Irwans, you know, the Gino DeLisas. They've been listening to me commentate behind them for years now. So I think that's helped kind of train them for TV play. So they get in front of it. It's like, I'm used to this. I can hear them talking. I've been hearing Anthony talk for years. Like,
sure,
no problem. So travel, got to get used to the live streams. The schedule. I mean, it is tough. You are in a lot of events. You know, you're up at 7 a.m. and you're playing cornhole back to back, you know, sometimes 2 or 3 brackets. You might be done at 8 o'clock at night. So definitely the hustle. I don't know how you would mock that in practice. Obviously, telling someone to play for 16 hours is kind of ridiculous, but maybe you play at different times of day, get up early and you're playing in the morning, and then force yourself again to come at late at night, maybe before bed, just to kind of mock what you would see there. But those are probably some good things for pros of what they might understand or expect.
And on a comment on that 16-hour day thing, make sure you eat food, because I see a lot of people going to their first big tournament, they like don't eat enough, and by the end of the day, they can't even throw the bag.
Exhausted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the morning comment even, because a ton of people, blind draws and stuff, they're always at night, right?
Yeah.
A local regional, ours usually start around 10 a.m. It's not bad, but down in Louisville, I think it was 8 a.m.
8 a.m. was mine.
I think it was 8 a.m. Might have been 9, but I think it was 8, and it was like you see people walking in like they're still asleep.
Yeah.
So, and they're not ready to play. And I'm like, cool, I hope I'm playing him. I'm excited. But so you made a lot of good points there. What is the hardest part for you personally? Is it travel?
I would say everything I mentioned is one of the hardest things for me. One thing I didn't mention that's really hard is it's fun. You are out there and you become right. You become, close with these people. You're traveling with them. You're staying in hotels. You're throwing craps on the same table. You're playing blackjack. You become really close with these people, and you want to hang out and party all night. The hardest part for me is forcing myself to go to bed at the right time. I never did. I definitely would have been a better pro if I did. That's really hard is to say, am I here for my business? Am I here for my career? Or am I here to party and have a good time?
I'm here to enjoy myself. Yeah. Yeah.
I like
you can do a little bit of both, but I do get that. And we did touch on this earlier, but I'd kind of like to hit it again. The difference between advanced players and pro players. I mean, is it that mental capacity? Is it just overall consistency?
Yeah, definitely. Matured nerves for sure.
I like that.
Yeah. A pro and a seasoned pro, everybody gets nervous, but a seasoned pro knows how to manage those really well. And you can see games go to complete crap when nerves kick in. You get the yips and everything that you've ever practiced and worked at just goes out the window. Definitely the head side of the game. I talked about the stream and the broadcast. A pro becomes comfortable. So right now at the pro events, to give you an example, we have 4 secondary courts going all the time. So there is a really high likely chance some point during that weekend you are going to cycle through a stream court. So you don't want that to happen. I just won 3 in a row. I win my next game. I'm on the hill match or whatever. Like, you don't want to blow it on the stream at that point. So that's a big one between a pro and advanced player. The advanced players jump in. They've never felt that camera level with the lights and the court and the commentators. I mean, there's a lot of eyes on you and a lot of attention. So that would be a big one. And just diversity in the elite level of play. Advanced players, I think we talked about kind of those fancy shots. It's fun. They want to do all these fancy things, but I think these seasoned pros are starting to realize situational awareness and when I should be using these types of throws. So I see that with a seasoned pro going up against an advanced player trying a bunch of stuff they probably shouldn't, and decision making really good for a pro level.
Well, and I think in the pro level too, like going into the picking maybe not the smartest shots at the pro level, you rarely see a pro give up a 6. They might give up a 4 is kind of like bad. They will give up a 6, but mostly a 4, mostly 2s, 1s, maybe a 3. If you play against a pro or at the pro, if you give away a 6, it's really difficult to get 6 points back. Like, that's like 3 rounds of you basically incrementally getting it back. So I think that's why, like you said, we're going to see it waning back, because it's just the damage of 1 or 2 errant bags in a round. It just takes so many good bags to get back.
Yeah, I totally agree. And really should give props to the advanced level of play. There are some really good players out there that aren't pros, and we will eventually see them cycling into the pro division. Pro division is just going to get stronger and stronger. So I wouldn't take anything away from the advanced players as far as a talent perspective, because we see it all the time. We go to an open and we see, who's that guy? Who's that guy playing Matt Guy in the finals? So you got people coming out of nowhere. There's clearly a lot of talent at the advanced level, but we'll eventually see those guys in the league, I'm sure.
Yeah. And with those advanced guys, I mean, do you see any common mistakes that they're making, or is it mostly just decision making, like you're saying, being way too aggressive when they don't need to be and trying to make the shots?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's anything common across the board.
Okay.
Because there really are a bunch of talented players. I mean, really just dealing with nerves in a head game, I think, is the biggest difference between an advanced level and a pro.
Well, I think you made a good point. As the time goes on, basically in some areas, advanced level is a pro tournament. They're just not all, they just don't all have the ACL pro tag on them, but they're all, we have some local guys that could be pros. They just have no desire to even try to be pros. They just want to do local tournaments but I mean, all over the country, as this game gets bigger, there's going to be pro level players everywhere.
Yeah, and I think I like the way Mark Richards said it. He said, play the game, not the name. So when you get to the pro level, you might have been messing around with Matt Guy in between tournaments, playing a couple games or, whatever. So you become comfortable. That name isn't so scary anymore. An advanced player comes in, he stands up next to, Jamie Graham for the first time. It's going to get in his head. But the pros there, I played Jamie Graham in the teams event. I played him in doubles. I ran into him in a blind draw, so that name starts to have less of effect on you mentally. Sure. So I think that's an edge for the pros. It's just being exposed to these names constantly.
I like that.
I do like that.
You went into commentary a little bit. You did the commentary, you started out in your Colorado and now you've been dabbling a little bit more with the ACL stuff, the USAC stuff. What do you think makes up interesting commentary versus boring commentary? Like if you hop into a stream, what makes you want to stay and listen and what makes you want to pop off? Other than obviously just good cornhole, but commentary goes into a lot of the enjoyment experience. And because cornhole is inherently not the most entertaining game going on if everyone's just four-bagging all the time. So what do you think goes into that interesting commentary?
So 3 different levels of commentary, in my opinion. So where I started was, and where a lot of us are, behind a phone, right? You're a solo commentary guy behind a board and you're just rattling off rapid fire commentary. Next level is working with another person. So it's a team, you got a 2-man crew on a stream that has like a Facebook attached to it. So you actually get feedback from your viewers, all the way to NBC and ESPN, where now you're in the booth and you have your co-commentator. You get no feedback from the audience. So you're kind of in your own zone. So really with those, I mean, entertainment value for the people. And I think, this is where Wally does a really good job of what he does is he does a really good job of including that Facebook audience, really good job of recognizing that they're there, answering questions and stuff that are coming through the post, but at the same time, managing color of the game. So I think that would be, for that second level, I think that's a big piece of keeping people's interest, and what makes it fun is interacting with the remote viewers, if you will. My style is obviously very technical. If you listen to any of my solo behind the board stuff, it's very rapid fire, and it doesn't cater to the common viewer. And that's what's really hard at the NBC and the ESPN level is you have to speak to the common viewer. So you're going to get bored, but Jamie at home watching it from her couch needs to understand what is cancellation scoring and how many points do I get going in the hole. So it's really tough to cater to everybody. You might get bored watching an ESPN because it's so dummied down, but then those people would lose interest on something really technical behind a phone. So it's hard to cater to everybody. It really it depends on what level of broadcasting you're talking about.
And so then going into the 2 different stages, what do you think is the biggest differences, and maybe how do you learn to, or biggest differences being by yourself and then having a team? Like what do you have to learn when you get that other person in the booth to not talk over each other? Like what do you think goes into that?
Yeah. So, and as we see more people cycle onto Wally's commentary, yourself, I've also all this secondary courts that we're doing at the ACL. You see it; it's really hard, especially like someone like Tornado, who's been commentating a ton out of the Northeast, right? Mm-hmm. All of it's been solo. You put him in a booth with someone else, and I was in the same position. You're really holding back, talking over somebody. So a lot of it's a relationship build. So if you look at Trey Ryder and Jeff McGarriger, they've been commentating for so long that they already know each other's cues. Like They can feel that pause and when someone should kind of jump in to fill up that empty space. I've done 3 NBCs with Jeff McGregor, so I think we're getting better. But that takes really like a team effort of like working with someone, and it's hard to really just pick up on their cues of when you stop talking and when you start talking, because you obviously don't want to run over each other. It's tough.
I would say the greatest part about the 2-man, though, at least, you know, when I was doing the Wally in Iowa, because I do the solo stuff on Wednesday nights. I run a event and stream it every single Wednesday for everyone to get on it and stuff. And I'm doing it solo. When I was doing it with 2-man, it's nice because you can kind of bounce stuff off each other and like have more fun, where it's like more entertaining to listen to, where I don't just have to talk about gameplay. I could talk about, you know, this person did this and I was talking to this person earlier, they said this, and then you laugh, like stuff like that, where you have that relationship. So I think the 2-man is just way more interesting to listen to personally, but
it is. And when I started commentary, I was like, I want to speak to the diehard cornhole players. Those are the guys I want to talk to. So it was very technical. It was 100% about the game. So that's probably the demographic is really small, right? So yeah, I need to figure out, and I have figured out how to speak to a larger audience so that you're capturing as much entertainment as possible. But it's tough because you got everyone from I'm watching cornhole for the first time to I want to hear about, you know, was that a throwing hand side left to right slice collect off the left side? Like someone wants that level of detail, you know, so it's tough to cater to everybody.
Well, we talked a little bit where your ACL opportunities came from, you know, talking to Trey and just him seeing your stream beforehand. But like, are you starting to transition at this point? Are you enjoying the content commentary side more than the playing side? You know, I know in the last episode you were like, man, I just can't get on the boards as much, been so busy. But like, has that switch happened yet? Like, do you really enjoy doing it more than playing, or do you think playing still is you know, you still love that more?
Man, I love playing. I love playing. But I love this side of it too. It's really tough. It's I am missing playing as much, but I'm at the same time I'm really enjoying speaking about what I'm seeing on the boards and just trying to share that information with people. So I kind of go back and forth. When I get into tournament, I love throwing better. When I'm in the booth, I'm like, oh, I love this better. So it's like, I don't know what I like better at this point. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I am enjoying the commentary 100% for sure.
You got any goals for commentary in the future? Anything, anywhere you want to take this, or you just kind of going with as it comes, or?
Man, international is going to start opening up. That'll be pretty interesting. So that'll be kind of a whole new feel. I mean, what does international play look like? You know, what does someone in Netherlands look like from a bagger standpoint? So developing that side of the commentary would be really nice, really fun, I think. Plus you're kind of, I imagine it'll be a big gap in talent level. You know, you've got this game that was homegrown in the US, and now we're going over and playing another country. So how do you develop that? So I think developing that as a commentator would be a good next step. We kind of talked about developing how to speak to someone because the more I end up on TV, you really have to speak to the new play, because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to grow this game. You know, that's what's going to keep us all doing this. So developing how to speak to the common person at home, I think is a good goal for me moving forward, to kind of fine tuning that for sure.
But don't lose your analytical side, because I love that too.
I know. So that's where I need. That's where it's cool to have that. And Jeff McGregor does a really good job at that, because he does play kind of the common. He thinks like the common person, so he'll tee you up for a question.
Sure.
You know, so that's really good to get teed up and be able to break that down for people of all levels.
Hey, but when you go to other countries, imagine how much more data mining room you got now. You're going to have so many more stats together. It's like, who is this guy? Plus, how many names are you going to mispronounce, man? Holy mackerel.
Oh, my gosh. Good point. Good point.
Netherlands, man. Good luck with those last names.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
But last kind of section we'll go into, as the Cornhole science guy, obviously we got, you know, hopefully practice, you know, going into learning different kinds of shots and everything. Corbin, why don't you take the practice? You're more the practice guy.
Yeah, I do love my practice. What is the Cornhole Science approved practice routine? Do you have one?
Ooh, that's tough. So I have been telling myself I need to develop something that people can follow. And I think just more of a guide to get people, you know, we could all practice different ways and get to the same place. But I think there's some things that are fundamentally important no matter what your practice style is. finding a dedicated spot, I think, is important. You know, there's so many people struggling to, like you were saying, you wish you had a man cave in your basement. I mean, finding and you see it. I mean, even at the pro level, like in Eric Anderson, I mean, he's like he's got like a spot at Dave and Buster's or something. And then now he's in, you know, you see Jay Rubin throwing down the hallway of his house or whatever, you know, like having a dedicated spot is really important. Locking that up, even if that means you're stopping somewhere on the way home from work. Your boards are constantly, you know, it's a little bit more work to pull them out, but finding a dedicated spot is going to be big. Eliminating distractions. I can't imagine how that you practice with a little one running around all the time. I have the same thing. My little man cave here with the court also has a basketball court going across it. So a little mini set. So I've got a 12-year-old who's constantly playing basketball while I'm practicing, but eliminating distraction, because I think focused practice is so important. And what we all do, what we want to do is we just want to go out there and start throwing bags, and we're not really thinking about what we're doing. Picking a time regiment, I mean, is really important. Get on a routine. It's almost like working out, right? I mean, you know, sometimes working out sucks, but if you force yourself on a specific routine at a specific time, you know, it's going to kind of get you into a groove, because you got to practice if you want to take this game to the next level. I think having a clear goal for each session is important. You know, what am I going to be working on today? Am I doing shot work? Am I doing box movement? You know, am I doing gameplay stuff? But if we were going to kind of break down a routine, I think it's important to not just work on your, you know, your slide shot. You know, I mean, obviously you got to work other things, dedicating time to airmails. And I think it's so important to track your own stats. I know it sucks, and you're probably going to have a paper and a pen there, or maybe you videotape it and you go back and you mark them all off there that way in like a fast forward style thing. But you have to know where you are at. You have to baseline your skill, because what we find with practice is motivation is the hardest thing. You get bored. So if you start establishing some level of skill and you can see little improvements, it's going to motivate you to want to go do more, you know? So if you can track your airmail percentage, your PPR, your bags in a row, you know, if it's a scenario thing, like I beat Ghost 5, I beat Ghost 7, I beat Ghost 10. Now I'm going to try and beat Ghost 10.5. Like some iterative approach to give you something to work towards is going to keep you motivated in practice, which I think is really important. What do you guys think? What do you guys do for practice? Anything?
I lay down a bag and practice pushing and then replacing and pushing. Because for me, my slot, I can airmail. Airmail is my shot. I could just shoot airmails all day. So like I just work on pushes, because I'm like, as long as I can keep the board clean or make it dirty and airmail and clean up the end of the round, that's what I practice the most. But practicing situational shots, I don't really slide in too much. I usually just try to constantly lay blocks. I go out there with like fast side Vipers and try to lay blocks with Vipers. Because if I can lay a fast side Viper block, then I know that I can stay up the middle regardless of how fast or slow the boards are. That kind of stuff.
What I find helpful is practicing with 8 bags minimum. And the reason being is it does present situational stuff, because eventually you're going to get cluster, or the hole's going to fill up, and then you're going to get a kind of a bag in the way. And then you can start playing off of what's presented to you. Because if you don't have someone, you know, I've tried it with my 12-year-old. I'm like, all right, bud, for the next hour, you're going to just sit this blocker where I tell you to for the next hour. You know, you might not have like a caddy, you know, someone who just like puts a blocker where you want it. So I'll play with 12 bags sometimes. And if my hole fills up, I go into an airmail thing, because if you can hit enough airmails, it'll kind of clear out the bottom. But yeah, 12 bags is really good, because it will present you with blocks and pushes. And then you start to pile up, and then you start working your really hard power slides, you know, trying to clear stuff out, which could play into big pushes and penguins and things like that. But 8 to 12 bags is a good way to kind of force situational stuff.
One thing you said box movement, and I was going to ask this earlier, but I totally forgot.
That piques my interest too.
Yeah, so I have a lot of people locally and a lot of people that I see play, and even at advanced level, that refuse to step out. Like they just do not step out, regardless of if it would make the push easier. They have a lane, blah, blah, blah. What do you think? Because I step out all the time, and I'm like, dude, I tell my partner, I'm like, just step out and throw fast side. You literally have bumpers everywhere. It's like, what do you think people are losing? Why is stepping around the box so important?
Oh, man. I mean, if you get into angles and stuff like that, it's so important. But one of the big things about stepping out, and a lot of it's not just getting in the hole. So a lot of it is, what are you going to do with an opponent's block? Sometimes moving an opponent's block is more important than getting in the hole.
Correct.
So for example, if my opponent is outside arm and they lay down a perfect center block, I want to step out, not just to get a better angle on the hole, but my goal is to contact that center block and move it his lane side ever so slightly, giving me the lane and taking away his lane all in one shot. Because for the next 3 bags, I've just given myself a lane and jacked up his lane. So stepping out is really important, really important. And at the elite level, you see it all the time. I mean, Matt Guy, I think, is one of the best step out guys, and he doesn't even get any credit for that, but he is really good at stepping out when he needs to, because the guy is going to be just shooting a hole shot, whether it's a 3-foot step out or against the hole. His line is so good and so on. He just needs that angle. But yeah, you have to develop your step out. But there are people like a Sarah Cassidy that I rarely see step out, and she has a lot of success. Yeah. Cheyenne Renner will just go through bags. She'll go through them. She won't mess too much around with a step out. I'm just going to go through it. Which is a strategy as well.
Yeah, and I tell people, I mean, at least for practice routine, for the common player or anybody listening to this, like, at least get comfortable stepping out, because when you step out, you do shrink your board, like you have less board to aim at. But I see at blind draws or other kind of events where I'm just like, people are so uncomfortable to step out. It's something you need to just be used to and comfortable doing, because the shots will come out where it's like you just have a better lane if you step out, or if you have a better shot if you step out. So I've been wanting to address that for a bunch of podcasts, but I'm like, I see people do that, and I'm like, it's something you need to be practicing, because it's so important to be able to do if you have to.
It's going to be huge for your collects.
Yes.
So huge for your collects. Both sides, outside arm and inside arm.
Something I see a lot is people, it's like all or nothing. They think that they have to step out all the way, or they're going to be hugging the board.
Bingo,
use the entire 3 feet of that box. I mean, it's sometimes, they lay, like you're saying, like blocker, but it's a little bit their lane side. And all I have to do is just, boop, maybe a 6-inch step out, but that changes so much on how I can attack that bag, bully them out of the way, and take over that lane. So you don't have to go your full 3 feet and then totally whiff because you have less board to deal with. It's utilizing that entire box.
Yeah, man, you nailed it. And if you look on Cornhole Science, there's a video, I think it's under the tips and tricks series, but I ran the math on how much board you lose when you do a full
I remember
step
that.
out.
Yeah.
You lose a big chunk of that corner. So what does that mean? You have to fire the bag deeper and higher, because so many times you see guys catching the side of that board and they're just kind of coming off the side. So good point. A 1-foot step out might be all you need.
Yeah. Yep. Do you ever feel like there's a way you could practice? Is there a way you could put yourself under pressure when you practice, or is it just getting out and playing tournament reps? Like, is there anything you do to like try to simulate some of that pressure?
The only way I can simulate pressure is we kind of going back to what we're talking about, stat tracking, keeping track of some stat, whether it's keeping track of a score by playing like Ghost 10 will add some pressure
or something. Yeah.
Yep. Doing a deck around or a deck holio, some way to force you to go, damn, I got to throw, a 10-12 to beat my high. Deck around. Playing somebody is always huge, but I think in a practice scenario, it's playing someone with practice in mind, not necessarily I'm playing someone to win. Like you're intentionally throwing certain shots or working together on a specific practice itinerary. I think is really important, having that in mind, because you're just going to play into their gameplay and you're not going to really, really diversify what you're trying to do. Yeah, that's the only way. I mean, if you're doing like an airmail practice, somehow to count or somehow to keep track of percentage, some way to force yourself to beat something, I think is the only way to install pressure.
And then Corbin had this recently. I had this a little while ago, but what's the best way, in your opinion, to get out of a slump? Whether it's, practice or what, like, how have you found, whether you're getting the yips, you got mental stuff, you got your throws not getting flat anymore, all of a sudden you're losing something. Is it going back to the basics? Like, how have you found to just like, how do you wipe the slate clean or get back into your rhythm?
Yeah. So for me, I'm not going to pretend like I have a good answer here, but for me, I simplify it. I just go to hole shooting. Like if I'm struggling, I'm not trying to do anything fancy. I'm not going to try and cut or roll. I'm going back to the basics. I'm going to run bags and I'm going to shoot airmail, and that's it. And then once I can get my line down and my airmail is on point, that means I'm hitting my target or my landing point. Then I'll start to add back in a cut or a roll. But I will basically bring it back to the basic to 2 shots before I expand back out.
Awesome.
Couldn't even hit 1 shot.
Yeah.
It was rough for me.
So if you can't hit the board, there's no cure to that.
Dude, it disappeared. It was like a week and a half gone. Could not hit anything. And I wasn't trying to flop roll. I wasn't even trying to airmail. It's like, I'm just trying to slide down the middle of the board, left, right, short, left. I'm like,
yes,
what is going on? And I couldn't figure it out. And it's actually taken a little break that helped. I had a super busy week of work and hardly thought about cornhole, couldn't play. Came back to it, and I threw last night and I threw great. And there's no reason. It's just maybe that break was what I needed.
Yeah, and for people listening out there, that happens at every level. It's the weirdest thing. You can go from, a heater to like, what? I don't even know how to fix it. So
it can happen in the same game, like back-to-back rounds. Like you 4-bag, and then the next round you miss one off the right, like 3 feet right. You're like, what the heck was that? Like, how is that? That wasn't even close. Like that doesn't. Oh man!
Don't panic. Don't panic. It will come back.
It'll come back.
Well, is there any shout outs you want to do, man? Anybody help you get where you are today, or that you wanna put on blast in a good way?
Yeah, definitely people that helped me get here. Yeah. Yeah, definitely like to give a shout out to Mile High Cornhole. We talked about them earlier. Those are really the people that got me going. Corn Tricks Cornhole has been huge for me in keeping me up with the right equipment and keeping me on my game there. Really a shout out to the pros. I mean, so during this transaction, I've had a ton of support from my fellow pros. Previously my fellow pros and peers when I was a pro transitioning into this. I mean, just a lot of support from those guys. I mean, I remember Matt Guy coming up to me on my first NBC broadcast. I'm in the middle of the broadcast and I'm talking, probably the only guy that could get away with that. Matt Guy's tapping me on my shoulder and I'm already freaking out. And I turn around, I'm on the air and he just shook my hand. And I thought that was really cool for him just to say, hey man, good luck. Jay Rubin, Noah Wooten, Eric Anderson, Davis, Tony Smith, Jimmy Humans, Jamie Graham, all these guys, not only have they kind of supported my transition, but they're really good about bouncing cornhole things off of each other. So a lot of the stuff that I drop on, live broadcast or feeds or recordings are information that we've talked about. I'm not just making things up here. So I'd love to send a shout out to those guys. Trey Ryder, man. I mean, this guy, obviously the GOAT of commentary for sure. I mean, he'll be a legend in this, and he has been awesome to really work with. He's opened every possible door of opportunities for me. He continues to be someone great to work with and a good friend. So definitely a shout out to Trey Ryder on that one. So, and I got to give a shout out to we talked about him at the Nuggets game, Bob Bronson. None of this would have happened. I wouldn't be here today if he wasn't like, we're going pro, right? All right, uncle, we're going pro.
It's crazy. It's crazy how those things work out, though. It's just my wife's cousins brought some game changers to camping last summer. And then me being obsessed with stuff, I was like, oh man, I got to do some research into this. And now 6 months later, here we are. So it's just, it's amazing how these little things just happen. And all of a sudden, you find something.
Yeah.
So
no doubt.
Well, really appreciate you joining us, man. I hope to see more cornhole science content in the future. And once you have time to edit, I know trust me, from INRA, I can relate. I totally get. So if anybody doesn't see content from any of us for a little bit, it's editing. All right. It's not the filming, but
no doubt.
Hope to see you more in the commentary. Obviously, see you more in the streams, maybe a little bit on the ESPN side, and then everyone tune in to the Around the ACL podcast on the digital network, and then wherever you could find podcasts. Awesome thing if you want to learn a little bit more about the ACL and pro players. But really appreciate you joining us, man. Everybody listening, hope you guys have a great rest of your day and rest of your week, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks, guys.